Hello and welcome to another episode of the Danielle K Show. I am so excited. I have Shamina Taylor in the house today. And you guys, one of the reasons I kind of rebranded this podcast is I feel like there's so much power in hearing people's stories, especially powerful women who have gone through a lot, created big shit. And so I invited Shamina on today to dive in and share her story. We were kind of talking a little bit before the podcast and I was like, we need to save this. The audience needs to hear your truth. And if you guys are listening to this podcast too, don't forget, it's important to share the podcast. If you're finding any value or you think a friend might find value in this, definitely share the podcast. So thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Hey you guys, it's Danielle K. White. Welcome to the Danielle K. White Show. On this podcast, what you can expect is anything from fashion, fitness, hair, and yes, even family. I'm the creator of Natural Beat Real Hair Extensions and Isla Hand-Tied Hair. But what I'm really passionate about is sharing other people's stories, how they went from the pit to the peak, how entrepreneurs build the success that you see online today. So definitely tune into this podcast for a good story and a little bit of fashion and a little bit of hair and beauty mixed in. We all got stuck in traffic today.
Yes.
Like Miami traffic is like a whole nother beast. It takes like 25 minutes to go a mile. But
this is truth.
It's truth. But we're here and I feel like doing a podcast is kind of a commitment. But the reason I love podcasting is because you really get to know people other than just like, hey, let's go grab coffee or something. It's like intentional content where I can get to know you and other people can find more value in it.
And it's like some of those conversations you have with your girlfriend, you're like, imagine if other people could have heard what we were just talking about.
Yes.
Like, let's do that. And that's kind of why I participate in it too, because sometimes we just get real and, and it's like, wow, you can learn from this too.
It's interesting you say that. My husband and I literally started, we have a podcast called Date Your Wife. And we literally started because we were like having these like deep conversations and we're like, we should record this shit. Like exactly. it's people find a lot of value in it. So your story is kind of unique because you are a single mom. You have two beautiful children. You were in law and then you transitioned to something totally different. But I want to kind of go back to the beginning. Did you always want to go into law?
Yes, I always wanted to be a lawyer.
Okay.
Yeah, it was one of those things. I think when I was 8, I think I argued a lot. So maybe people must have said, you should become a lawyer. I don't know. But it was always my track that I was going to go to law school, like hell or high water. That was it, Okay. And I did.
Yeah.
And I practiced law for 20 years.
How old were you when you went into law?
I was probably like 25.
Okay.
I did 2 undergrad degrees before that. I did a business degree and a political science degree. Everybody in law school has a political science degree.
Okay.
And then I got my business degree and then I went to law school.
Okay. Were you married at the time or?
No, I'm single. Yeah. I got married right after.
Okay. And how long did you practice law for?
About 20 years.
Oh, so you were in law for 20 years?
Yeah, I was a lawyer. I was a lawyer. I was a real estate lawyer.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And then so during that time, when did you have your kids and get married and all that?
In the beginning, so I when I was practicing law, I had my own firm.
Okay.
I had my own firm. So I figured one of my girlfriends had said you should get into real estate because you can actually have kids and do it. So if I was doing personal injury when I first started, and there was no way I could go to court and have kids. So then I decided, let me try this, contracts out, which was the real estate. And sure enough, I could do some of the stuff at home. I had a baby nursing while I was pregnant, doing contract work. Wow. And I would take my kids to the closings with me. Like I remember, having my son in the baby carriage, take him to the closings because I was nursing. So being a mom of 4, you can't get them off, like get the boob away for too long or else they eat it, And one time I left him with a babysitter and I came back and she had all these wet marks on him. I'm like, what's going on? She goes, he was looking for food. So I took them everywhere with me.
Wow.
That's how it was.
It's crazy as a woman. It's because like for me, and I don't know if you ever felt this way, like I always wanted to have a career, but I always wanted to be a mom.
Absolutely.
And I was like, there's no reason I have to pick. I will balance it and juggle it and take the kids with me and do what I need to do. So you had your kids when you were practicing law. And tell me how old are your kids are older now. You said you're almost
my son is 19. He's off to college. And my daughter is 17. She'll be 18 in a few months.
Oh, wow. That's so crazy. Yeah. So you're like practicing law. You have your own firm. How did that come about?
Well, I wanted to be my own boss. And I was working for a guy who is an absolute And so I said, I can do this on my own. And so I went out on my own. It was kind of scary though. I didn't know how to do real estate. Yeah. I went to another friend who was doing it and they said, take your first job, like take your first contract. I said, okay. And then I'll teach you what to do. And that's literally how I did it.
Oh, wow.
And
did you find were you passionate about it or?
I loved helping people buy their first home, and then, there was a part, where the market went sideways. And that's when things were, I had to reassess, like, is this really what I want to do? Because things were changing. But before that, I mean, I loved the excitement. And I was the type of lawyer that would not leave unless a deal was closed. I was doing short sales before people were doing short sales. And, you know, I used to flip houses with, you know, people coming for cash buys, like sometimes no cash closings, you know, on the first, and we would close. I mean, we were doing crazy stuff back then.
It sounds like you're like very, very driven, and you were married, but you're divorced now, correct? So, well, I have to ask this because I feel like you've played the masculine and feminine role really, really well. And it's interesting because, like, for me, it's like I've always wanted to work, but I've always wanted to be a mom. Was it hard to kind of juggle that, you know, like being married and having kids and finding that balance?
100%.
Like, how did you do it? Because, like, that's like the number one question I get. They're like, how do you balance both roles?
So while I was married, my ex-husband, he worked a lot too because he had his own business. Okay. So I was always a supporter of my husband to have his own business. I helped him go out on his own too. I'm like, just go for it. Yeah. I think because I come from an entrepreneur mindset. My mom's an entrepreneur, grandmother, great grandmother. It was in my blood to like not work for somebody, you know?
Right.
And so he went on his own, and I didn't want a nanny because I thought I could do it all. But this is where my mistake was, to be honest with you, looking back. If I could do it again, I wouldn't be doing, you know, I was in the hospital with my second child, and the lawyer said, so I said, I'm going to have a baby soon. He's like, well, when's you going to have the baby? I go, I don't know, like in an hour or so. And he's like, what are you talking about? I go, I'm in the hospital. He's like, we can like postpone this closing. And, you know, I'm like, well, these people have a lock. Yeah. So if I knew what I knew now, the way that I would have run my life before would have been so much easier. But I was so conditioned to be in suffering and to be in survival mode that I would run myself into the ground and not have little sleep. I remember the kids were having a nap and I would be on the treadmill, or I'd be trying to, like, one would be in the bathroom because we lived in the city, so it was a smaller place. One would be in the bathroom, one would be in the closet, and I would like sleeping with monitors, and I would be running on the treadmill just to get the workout in. I'd be up late doing contracts. Like you
didn't have a nanny back then?
Every time I brought someone in, I always found fault with her.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, oh my gosh, what is she doing? What is she cooking? Why is she in my space?
Yeah, yeah.
And my ex-husband was actually traveling all the time. So I look back on it, and I was just conditioned to believe that I was supposed to do it all on my own without receiving support. Oh. And that's where I had like a very, the masculine wasn't healthy in what I was doing, but from the trauma that I grew up with, that was the only masculine I knew, was that you just got it done. You just push through. You don't ask for help because help means you're weak and you're vulnerable and you're not a boss.
Right. I think that a lot of women can actually relate to that. We do. We try to do it all to the point where we're burning out. And then it's like, at that point you have to ask yourself, like, I'm with my kids at the time, but am I being like the best mom? You know, for me, like similar story with my first two kids. Like, I felt like I tried to do it all, bringing them to salons and events and things like that. And then my last two, I had to let go of a lot of like the mom guilt and like almost be like, okay, maybe I'm a good mom, but like maybe somebody else can love my kids as much as I love my kids.
Or teach them something that you can't.
Exactly. Yeah. So you had your kids and you were doing it all. Was there a phase where you were like just kind of burnt out and done? Or?
So yeah, I mean, I had my rock bottom. I had like a very pivotal point. I remember one time though, my son, I think he was in kindergarten or preschool. Like he went to a good preschool, and he drew a picture. He brought home a book, and it was drawings of his life. And I opened it up, and I see this stick figure, you know, in this picture. And I said, who's that baby? And he goes, that's mommy. And I go, what's mommy doing? Mommy's sleeping on the couch, laying on the couch. Because that's how whenever he saw me, I was crashing out all the time. Yeah. And so that kind of hit me like a ton of bricks, that I was burning myself out to the point that my kid drew me
on the couch,
laying out. And so fast forward to, you know, maybe a year or two, you know, later. And I was telling you earlier, I was doing figure competitions and I didn't know how to fix the inside. So I always was fixing the outside. So I would do triathlons. I was always pushing myself to different things, you know. So bodybuilding was another thing that came up. And, you know, you need incredible discipline to get to a place where you're, you know, following the rules. Because if you slip, it doesn't work. So I just finished a bodybuilding competition, and a girlfriend of mine had joined me. She did bikini, and the news wanted to do a story on her. So I wanted to be a part of that story too. Right. And we went to a yoga studio. And I don't know if you've done yoga before. It's hard.
It's harder than you would think.
It's way hard. It was my third time doing yoga.
You're like, I'm sore in places I didn't know I had.
No, my lats just would not like cooperate. Yeah. So I was in this yoga class, and it was the changing point. This moment changed my life forever. And when I went into that class, I was prepared to win yoga that day.
Win yoga.
Mm-hmm. And I put my phone out beside me on the right, and my girlfriend had put a mat out there. I went up to the cameraman and I said, I don't know what I'm doing. But basically I was saying, hey, don't.
But I'm awesome. So it's fine.
Like, I'm awesome. Look at this cute Lulu. Like, make sure you like hone in on me. Yeah. I didn't know my life would forever be changed in the next 15 minutes. And so we're doing these dog downs up and down, up and down. And at this point in time, like, we had all the things that you were supposed to have as checklist. Like, we went to Europe in this, the summer. We went to the Caribbean in the winter. I had all the Louis Vuitton. I had all the material things you could possibly want. He had his business. I had my business. Yeah. I was like, I could walk into any store, buy what I want. He had an 8-pack. We had that like perfect looking life. And in this moment on this yoga mat, my girlfriend is talking and she's like, doing, I think we did like 150 dog downs at this point. And I was so pissed off at her because I was like, why are you showing off? Like, let me just look pretty doing this yoga here, right? And then at one point she says, put one leg one way and put the other leg the next way. And I'm competitive, so of course I'm going to do this because I'm going to win yoga. And so I grabbed those little box and I put it right in front of me, and I'm shivering, like I'm just like shaking because my legs are shaking in this point. And there's this like physical pain that came over, and I'm like, I'm going to push through this pain because this is what I've been programmed to do. So I'm pushing through this pain, and all of a sudden I started crying, and I'm like, the pain took over me. And then all of a sudden I left my body, and this pain, like I felt this emotional pain come through me, and I finally like just let everything out that I'd been holding on to for decades. It felt like I just was crying on this mat. And as she's talking, she's like, are you happy? And I'm like, I don't even know what that means. Yeah. And, and she kept talking. I'm like, I don't know who Shamina is anymore. I'd lost who I was in the process of going after my achievements and just surviving and pushing through. Right. And I'm like, as she's talking and I'm crying and losing it, literally I was bawling, and I stayed in that position for the rest of the class, and I lifted my head up and I'm like, something in my life has to change because now I can't unsee to know that I am really unhappy.
Wow. It's crazy. It's interesting. I probably had a similar situation like about 2 years ago. And I was like, I don't care about the cars and the money and the trophies anymore. I was like, what am I searching for? It's like this like unhealthy like checklist, Exactly. And it's not fulfilling. And then you're like, wait. And then you had to like really like you said, it's like this wake up call, like, who am I? And like, what am I chasing?
Exactly.
How many years ago was that?
It was January 9th, 2013.
Okay.
And it was a moment that changed everything. So after that moment, I went home, and my husband at the time, he was like, how was class? And a couple of days later we talked, and I'm like, are you happy? And he's like, no. I'm like, I'm not happy. Oh, wow. And we decided a month later he would move out, and he never moved home. And I spent the next 3.5 years figuring out why I and me and the marriage got to that point. Yeah. And I just didn't have the resources that I do now, but I spent 3.5 years in monk mode, I called it. Monk mode, where I was celibate. I just went into a deep healing. I did every healing modality you could possibly find. Wow. And I realized that I had unresolved trauma from my childhood, and it just was compounding throughout the decades of my life. And I just learned to be in survival mode. And it wasn't a place to be. Like, I hated the way he chewed carrots, and there was nothing wrong with it. But I was getting irritated with everything. And I realized that we had become roommates in our marriage, and we'd lost touch with each other. And being in such a masculine protective mode, my heart wasn't open. I was an ice queen. I literally was shut off from the world because I had to go into like survive. Like there was no moment for emotions, Yeah. And then on that yoga mat, it was like, oh no, bitch, it's time to wake up. Like you're not going to be able to go another day doing this. It's time. And so the transition to law, I realized, okay, something was calling to me. Like I started connecting to like forces I don't even know.
Because you're open.
Yeah. And it was like Christ consciousness was coming in. I started meditating. And I remember the first time I meditated, it was like 53 seconds. I was like, okay, did I do it?
Like, why did I tap into this?
Yeah. And then I started finding people like Dr. Joe, and I was meditating I meditated for an hour every day for 8 years. Oh, wow. And it changed my life on how I looked at what I needed to do. And I just realized that people walk around with so much unresolved stuff, then they don't realize that that's the lens they're looking through the world. And that's why the things weren't filling me up anymore or you, because it's like a colander. There's only so much shit you can buy. And it doesn't, it has a hit, like a dopamine hit or adrenaline for the moment. But then
you're happy for a minute. So it's almost like a mask of what you actually really
I wore
want.
It. Yeah. I wore a mask for years because I pretended to be a version of myself I thought I was supposed to because I didn't work on myself.
Mm-hmm. So you, with your husband, like, did you feel like you guys were just, like you said, you were kind of roommates, and then you have to ask yourself, like, how do we get to this place? Was it just lack of communication, conversation, honesty? I mean, I've been in similar situations with my husband, and I recognize it where I was like, hey, this is a problem. Like, I'm not going to like shove these feelings down anymore. And I've had to be better about like opening up and like communicating before it is too late. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So was it like something where both of you had just been like too long without any kind of communication?
Absolutely. Like, I didn't know how to communicate. I didn't even know how to identify my emotions.
Wow.
I didn't know how to express what I was feeling. And so I had to blame somebody. So I would like, oh, it was us, or it was him. And the guy would have done anything for me, you know, at some point. I mean, he had his own stuff he had to work through, but we didn't work through it together.
Yeah.
And so I think this is where marriage is fault. And a lot of women who are in this masculine state, they emasculate their husbands instead of not realizing that it's the trauma doing it. You know, if you've got a mother wound, your mother has passed down her unresolved trauma to you. You're going to just pick up where she left off like a baton.
Yeah.
And then, you know, if you've got a father who's been any bit abandoned in your life or hasn't been a safe place for you, that little armor is going to go up, and you're going to be protective even in your marriage to somebody who just wants to love you.
Yes.
But if you can't open up your feminine to receive it, then it just falls like you have two people that are going like this instead of, you know, having that attraction where there's a masculine and the feminine coming in. Like,
come together.
You know, my ex-husband was a hunter, a fisherman. He was like a provider. I mean, like I said, he had his own shit to work out. But, you know, I take responsibility too for where my part in that.
Right.
Had I known what I know now, I don't think we were meant to be together forever. But if this ever, I will never attract that situation ever again in my life because I'm aware now.
Yeah.
But I didn't have the awareness before. And so I work with a lot of women who don't realize, like the hustlers, the high achievings, the high whatever, you know, women, they all have this thing.
Yeah.
And so the thing that makes them successful is the exact thing
that can destroy their marriage.
Exactly.
Too. I know.
And also how they're chasing money and men. It's the same thing because they're hustling so hard. But if they relaxed a little, because I figured this out, they would receive more money.
That's what I was going to ask you, because it's interesting. I went through similar, like when I was building my brand, I was laughing when you're like, I was an ice queen. My husband was like, you're an ice queen. Like he'd call me all the time. I was like, what are you talking about? And I found myself doing the same thing. Like my husband would like turn a doorknob the wrong way. I'm like, you're an asshole. Like,
right.
And so for me, I was like, wait a minute. I don't remember an exact moment where I had this awareness, but it was just almost like, wait, I actually don't want to be an ice queen. I want to open my heart up to people, but I had to make like a conscious effort to do that. But I think, like you said, like women that are like, go, 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 it's a strength, but it's like also, it can be a weakness if you don't know how to open up your heart.
It's a trauma response, actually.
Yeah.
Women who are busy, it's because they don't find the stillness in themselves. So if you're constantly busy, you don't have to feel anything. You're just in your do mode, which is the masculine. So if you keep doing and you have a busy, I already know when a woman's like totally booked out, I'm like, oh, you don't know how to sit still by yourself.
I know.
Like if I ever say like, try meditation, like, what am I going to do there? Like, what do we get from this meditation? Like, what am I going to, how am I going to do this? I'm like, no, you just sit there and do what? You know? And so for me, it was like a deconditioning of me being like, go, go, go. Cause you tell me to achieve. I still have that in me to go get things done. But now I do it from a different place. You know, like before I was, if you heard the term be, do, have, right? Well, I was have, be, do, you know, or like, no, have, do, be. So if I get this success, you know, or I get whatever, I can buy this thing and then I'm going to look like I'm successful. Then I made it. And then, but now I'm like, no, I need to be this woman now.
And then it will come.
Then it will, you know, whatever I do from that energy will bring the things to me. Like I was giving an example earlier, another podcast I was on today is like, you know, before I would buy the things to show my success, right? And like when I bought my G-Wagon Cash, it was like, well, it wasn't for anybody else. It was just to make me feel wealthy because I loved it. But before it was like an opposite way, you know, like those things never fulfilled me the way that they were supposed to. And I think that's where we get it wrong.
Yeah, exactly. So you went through this kind of like era where you were just kind of closed off from a childhood trauma. Do you mind sharing what that was?
I can share about it now. Like I always say, when you can tell the story without an emotional reaction, you've healed from it, you know, and I could finally say I am healed from it. So when I was 16 years old, my parents were obviously going through a lot in their relationship, and it went for me. And my brother and I were kind of like the therapists in the house. And a lot of people go through this, you know, from what I'm finding out. Anyway, I found out my dad was cheating on my mother.
Oh, wow.
And I was very self-righteous as a child, thinking this was my place. But I remember telling him, if you don't tell mom, I'm going to tell her.
Oh, wow.
I'd run away from home. I came back that night. I don't remember a lot of it because it's blacked out. And
How old were you?
I was 16.
Oh, okay.
And it was actually Halloween. I actually didn't remember those dates until someone later on, my brother confirmed them with me. But I came home and he was raging mad, and he had hit me before. It was like a very normal thing. But this was the most, this was the most. Anyway, that day I came home and all I remember is it started in the kitchen and then it moved into like this small living room that had like pink rug in it, and he was on top of me, and I just remember him like taking my hair and like smashing my face into the carpet. I'll never forget like the fibers, and I just remember fighting for my life to get out of there. And I grabbed this phone that was beside me and I hit him, and I remember, I'll never forget, I saw like the red cut on his face, and he stopped for a minute because it hurt him, and that's when I got free. And I knew I had bare feet, and I ran out of the house to the neighbor's house. I was banging on the door. But if you saw my face, like both eyes were black and blue. My nose was broken. My face, every vessel in my face was broken, that I looked like I had all these red marks. My face was branded here. And I was only 16 and I have a 16-year-old right now, and just,
I can't even imagine.
Well, she's 17, but just to imagine what I went through. And for 2 weeks, I went and stayed with a friend, and my mom was in an abusive cycle too. So, I blamed her a little bit for a long time subconsciously, like, why didn't you leave, that situation? And I never got therapy for it. It was just, you just don't talk about it. And so I kept that with me forever. So then my little girl had to figure out a way to survive with the trauma. So every decision, everything that I did was through the lens of that, what happened to me. And so not only did I feel abandoned by my father and my mom, so I had like a victim mindset.
You're protecting yourself.
From a very young age, but I was such a survivor. Like if there was shit to get into, I was going to get into it. Like, I knew how to cut corners. I knew I was so street smart at that point that I could, but it helped me later in life. Like, I feel like I've come to a resolve about it, but growing up with that, and I remember I would try to tell the story. I told 3 people by the time I was maybe 28. I'd only told 3 people.
Had you kind of blocked it out?
When I would go start talking about it, I would just start to cry, and it was so under the surface. But I was such a raging bitch. Like, if people cut me off, I would yell at them. I was it triggered me so much, like how I operated. Anything someone would say to me would set me off, but it was that. And I didn't understand that was fueling all of the things that was happening in my life until I started doing my healing work and realizing that I was just so conditioned to, and then, I invited men in with a temper, and I had, some decisions that I had made. My self-worth was also very low. My self-esteem, like I had to overcompensate for a lot of things in my life because of that. Wow. But it made me a high achiever because when you feel unworthy, boy, can you work hard. Yeah,
exactly. Because you've got something to kind of prove.
Yeah.
So when you went on your healing journey, did that start after your divorce?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So
it started during the separation.
Oh, okay. So when it was the yoga moment, were you still married? Oh, no, that's when you came home and you were like, hey, we're done.
Yeah. And then 2 years, we had a lot of property to separate between us, and we were trying to figure out a way to resolve it. And it just, I don't like failing at anything, and I felt like it was a failure, and but it was nothing left for me to do.
Yeah. I was going to say, it's like a high achieving woman. You're like, no, I will fix my marriage.
Yeah.
will it into existence.
But when I was going through that process, it was like, I started seeing like when I would heal certain things inside of me, I started creating that reality on the outside. It's like, I started attracting things into my life. I started realizing that the only way that I was going to change from this victim lack mindset and go into abundance, if I start looking at the world from me having the power instead of showing up as a disempowered person and feeling like I was the victim. Cause I'd be like, you don't know what happened to me. Or I'd feel
kind of like a hard place.
Or I'd feel like people owed me something, just because I didn't know how to condition that,
Right. That's so crazy. So now, how did you, because I feel like a lot of women, like how you're describing, like just going and busy and busy and busy. It's like a distraction from like really kind of like, where are you at right now? Was it something that you had to go through? And I went through a similar journey, but I tell people, I'm like, it took me like years, you know what I mean? To kind of like let go and kind of like not try to control everything?
Yeah.
Or will it?
Well, the control freak in everybody.
Right?
Because, when you have been through trauma, control helps your nervous system get regulated. So that's like when I walk into someone's house and I see it perfect, I'm like, oh, they need that. So their nervous system feels calm. And because if there's the chaos outside, it's too much for the inside. Because that's how I see it, or needing to control I was like that until I had to learn to the feminine is the chaos, and embrace the unknown, embrace allowing myself to, not have everything figured out, but trust that it would always work out. I didn't have that before until I started doing the work that I do now.
When you're more in your, and I don't know about you, but when you're more in your feminine, do you feel like, I don't really, like you can call it a download, talking to God, spirit, whatever it is. Like when I'm in my feminine and more open, I actually feel more clear.
Yeah.
And I actually feel like, oh, I should talk to this person. I should do this. I should do that. Versus when I'm in my masculine, I'm very productive, but I'm not like noticing, like the feminine helps me like tune into like the direction I need to go.
That's your intuition, though.
Yeah.
That's your downloads. That's
right.
To me, that's your all knowing. And so many of these women who are hustlers and they're working hard, they're like
they're missing out.
They're cutting themselves off from the gift.
The
gift is like, you don't have to second guess, because all of them that I work with will say they're intuitive, but then they'll turn around and say, well, I didn't trust it.
Oh,
and so that's where the creativity, men do it too. Men have masculine and feminine. When you see a man who's like off and he's like, I got an idea and he's taking action on it, he's not sitting there figuring out, well, I need to have it all planned out. They're like, no, we need to go on this right now.
I got this feeling.
And this is where every successful man will tell you, the moment that he goes and just takes action on something, it's because he's trusting his feminine, his like creativity. And you'll see it, and it's not, but for the type of women we're talking about and who I used to be, and you as well, we were just not allowing even that part, because it feels weak to feel your emotions. So you can't just let your intuition in without letting the emotions in too, because if you don't feel something, then how can you can connect, right? And so like I found, like once I was doing that work, I could apply it to money. And when I started applying to money, it was a game changer.
Yeah. Because you were in law for how long? When did you stop doing law? How long ago was that?
Oh, I don't know, like 5 years ago now.
Oh, it's not
6 years. Yeah,
so it's not been too long.
Yeah.
So you have a successful firm. Like, what made you make the decision to
that yoga mat moment?
Oh, it was that moment.
Actually, it was before that. I was going to say maybe it was like 2000. I don't know, maybe 18. 18 was the last deal. Probably that's the last year I was like actively being a lawyer. But when something's calling to you and you just don't know what it is, and my faith muscle got exercised so hard during those years where I was healing and doing that work. And I did take a pause from working, because I was a mess. And I just was a mess. And plus the market took a downturn. So it was like, okay to take some time off. And I had some money aside. But when that money ran out, it was like, okay, we got to figure things out now. What's next? And so I had to figure out. And so I started this business that I have now officially in 2020. And it was almost like a sign, because literally the whole world shut down at some point after that 3 months later. And it was just
you're like,
I just feel like I'm totally protected. If I listen, I'm going to be guided. If I just trust the signs and I keep the faith that it's all going to work out.
I love that you're saying that, because I think that as women or entrepreneurs or anybody, it's like we'll have that intuition and we push it away because we can't see the path.
Right.
We're like, well, there's no guarantee, so I'm going to shut down that intuition, because it's scary to say yes.
Oh, yeah.
And then you're like, I don't know what I'm doing. This was a bad idea. Why did I say yes? And then you'll say yes, and then you'll hit a speed bump, and then you're like, never mind. And you'll keep pushing it away. But the crazy thing about intuition, or whatever it is you want to call it, it keeps coming back.
Always.
Until at some point you're like, okay, this is scary, but I'm going to do it, and I'm going to do it scared. Tell me about when you felt this calling to kind of get out of law and transition to that. What did it look like for you?
So I was like having like a spiritual awakening, honestly, and being a lawyer in evidence space, like where I needed proof for everything. Okay. And then when other things were happening, I'm like, there's no proof. Like, how do I was taking screenshots of things that the crazy things would start happening. I'm like, I can't tell anybody this. Like, I feel crazy now what was happening. But then I started getting confirmation, like little places, like people saying, I needed to hear that. Or women going, oh, you know what? That totally resonated with me. And my, part of doing this work, especially when you're putting yourself out there, creating a personal brand, you feel like you're sabotage. You feel like you're an imposter. You know, the self-sabotage comes up. And every time that little voice would come in to tell me like, who the hell do you think you are? I'm like, there would be another one saying, who the hell do you think you are to hold your message back? You better go out there and show up and do the damn thing. So I would be like, this is not about me. This is just, I'm the vessel that this is coming through. So get over yourself. And so every time that I showed up and I saw that even one woman one day said something I helped, I'm like, I need to keep doing this because there's more me out there, women like me that need this. And so that's why I kept going. And, you know, when I wrote the book or even my podcast or other things or the videos or the posts or just a conversation with like an Uber driver, anybody that I come in contact with, I just want to tell them, you don't have to suffer anymore, lady. Like you don't have to live in this masculine state. You're just doing this because that's all you know.
Yeah, you don't know. You don't see an out.
Yeah.
I love that you just said like we're a vessel because I genuinely believe that. It's like show up, you're like, hey, where am I going today? Who am I talking to? Who am I connecting to? Because you never know who you're going to impact. You never know who you're connected with. You never know who you're going to help. And that's how opportunities happen. And that's how we all grow and collaborate and do all the things. But ultimately, like that's what we're here to do.
Exactly.
We're not just here to I keep saying like the money's going to come and all that, but we're really here to impact. And almost like become this bigger version of us we've always kind of been, you know?
Absolutely. My thing is never chase the money. Yeah. If you come from service, the money will always come.
Yeah.
Like I didn't have to get on a plane and come out here, but you're giving me the opportunity to put me on your platform. You asked me to come on here. I'm like, sure, I want this message out. How many more people can we reach?
Yeah.
And that's to me how I feel like I've been blessed because if I have something that can change another woman's life, why wouldn't I do it? Yeah. You know, and I just always trust that the money's there. Like, because having this shift in perspective of not having any money and then becoming a woman with a wealthy mindset, it changed, but it was an abundance mindset. Yes. It was like, and I don't just give to get. I just give because I have it to give, you know?
Right. Don't mind the kid.
It's okay.
Yeah, we think we can always edit this. I actually like to keep it in. It's like super real.
Care. Yeah.
People be like, I heard your baby in the background. I'm like, yeah, mom shit, real mom shit.
I mean, my kids will walk in when I'm doing a live too, and I'm just like, this is who I am. This is me. I am my brand. Yeah. And so my kids are the wealthiest version of me. If you ask me what makes me feel rich, it's my children. Like my children. Both of my kids, I ended generational trauma with me.
I was going to ask how now that you have this knowing of this trauma that you went through and how you were in the beginning, how old were your kids and how did you now transition them to have that wealthy mindset, to have not just be a doer, but be intuitive? And how do you reach out with your kids?
So I had to learn as a single mom, how to raise a boy because most single moms do all the jobs. And so I had to take myself out of my masculine and raise him from a feminine perspective.
Yeah.
So with my son, I couldn't say, take the garbage out. I'd have to be like, I call him baby. I mean, baby, do you mind taking the garbage out? And I always invited my son into a conversation. I always allowed his masculine to grow around me. So he never felt emasculated by a woman. Yeah. So he felt, but he wasn't my man. He was the man, his own man, but he wasn't my husband. You know, I was so conscious of the roles when they were in the house. And one thing that I taught my kids were all their emotions mattered. So it didn't matter if they were upset. They were allowed to feel whatever they were feeling because I didn't have that growing up. I didn't have that person around me to say, it's okay when you're having, a down moment. It was always like, when we were little, they put a binky in your mouth. They would tell you to stop feeling your emotions. Right. So my kids are so emotionally mastered. Their emotional intelligence is beyond. I just had an in-person event in Chicago and I had my daughter come up and Shannon was there and I had my daughter come up and speak on stage and there was women crying in the audience because they were looking at the 17-year-old who's like, if people, don't want to be my friend, that's fine. I'm not going to waste my time. She was so emotionally mastered that they were crying because they know that their little girl never got that knowledge at that age. And so when I see my daughter so proud to share who she is, and they both have healthy relationships, because I feel like money's great. They both know that it's there. We live a great life now. They have a great life, but to have them in relationships, you can't buy a relationship and I only want them to be happy. And I can just see that they're going to get married once.
Yeah. Well, and I love that you're even teaching them to have feelings and it's okay.
Absolutely.
And you know what? I will say I don't know about your parents, but my parents, it was you didn't talk about your feelings. Like it just wasn't something. And now there's such an awareness of like, it's
Now.
okay now. And it's great. But like, I'm in that generation where I had to like teach myself and now try to teach my children.
Yeah. Reparent yourself.
Yes.
That's
exactly.
what it is. And it's because our parents weren't taught that either.
Right.
Right. And so there's no blame for it. It's just
Right.
what was happening. So we didn't have that. You know, I mean, when I look at our core wounds, like abandonment, betrayal, and unworthiness, I see that I had all of them, but I see that I didn't want my kids to ever feel like they were abandoned from the marriage, that they weren't feeling worthy, and that I always said what I was going to do to them. Like I've always kept my word with my children. And I do that with everybody now because I feel like if them, even if I blew up, because moms, we get crazy at some point. Like you lose your shit, it's going to happen. And so, but I always went up to them afterward and said, hey, mom had a moment and I'm sorry. And so at least it made them feel like they were worthy of that sorry. And they're like, it's okay, mom. And we'd sit there and talk about it. So my son, one time he came up to me, it's before he went to college, and he's like, thank you. I said, what? He goes, thank you for letting me know it was okay. I get emotional thinking about this, but letting me know that it was okay to feel my emotions. And because it's helped him communicate with everybody in his life. And he said it was safe to just feel like, and my kid said that to me.
Yeah. And I do think that's important to touch on because it's like, we almost harbor guilt for feeling like we get angry and then we wake up and we're like, oh, I'm such a piece of shit. And instead it's like, hey, I always tell my kids, I'm like, I'm sorry, I was stressed out. I had a human moment. And I'm like, I'm sorry. Mom said some things that were probably not the best thing in the moment. And it's like saying, my kids are like, they always come back like, it's okay. Like, I get it. But I think it's important to have that communication with your kids, but also not be like, harbor any guilt. Like, oh, I was such a bad mom. Because I think moms feel so much guilt as it is. So to kind of go back and to like talk to your kid and be like, hey, Mom's sorry. Like I had a moment, and then expressing, like you said, now he knows like it's okay to have feelings.
Yeah.
So I think that's like beautiful.
And I always went to all their games. My kids are highly competitive because we're a competitive household. So we play to win. And so that's something that I teach my children, and they're
like, if you're going to do it,
my daughter's like, she's like top cheer girl. She just actually got an award today. She's all-star. And my son did football and rugby, and he went to all-star too. Well, he's still playing rugby in college. So I'm obviously bragging on my kids, but one of the things that I taught them though is that you go for it and you show up and be the best you can be at all times, and so I think that's something that's so important. And I went to all their games. I can count on one hand how many things I've ever missed because I made them a priority, and I was never made a priority in my life growing up. But I wanted my kids to know we have 0 to 20 to really help them develop their emotional state and their brain, and I wanted them to always know that there's always one person you've got, and it's mom.
I think the biggest thing as a mom is like being open in communication.
Totally. Like
it's like we're all here. Like I said, I was raised where there just wasn't a lot of communication. So it's like one of those things. It's like, hey, the communication will keep that bond and keep it strong. So your kids are older now, and now you're in more of like the coaching space, correct?
Yeah, I mentor women. Yeah.
Okay, so talk to me. I know you're like, I felt compelled to do this in the beginning. Where you're like, oh my gosh, this is scary. Like, because I feel like a lot of women, they feel this like calling, and they're like in a field. Like I coach hairstylists, but I recently had a student. She's like, I'm getting out of hair. I'm going to go start coaching. I'm like, what do you coach? She's like, I don't know, but God's telling me to go.
Oh, wow.
So I was like, good for you. Shut down her salon and everything. But so how do you, when you start and you don't have a clear direction, like how did that go for you?
Well, I just started sharing about the emotional part of it. And that is what was clicking with women. And so then I created a program that's all about emotional mastery. And then that program took off. And then I created a mastermind. That mastermind got filled. And then I just started, as I was going, because I kept doing the work. I didn't stop. Because if I don't lead myself, how can I lead others? So I just kept showing up. And I do money work every day. I'm always doing my own work every single day to become the best version of me, the best mother. And so I started seeing, wait, there's this masculine, feminine aspect of it. Like I need to dig into that. So then I taught them that. And then I started seeing the money aspect, because so many, I have women who make 8 figures and they still have a scarcity lack mindset. It's like, it doesn't get shifted. So then I started teaching them, if you get to the root of where this is either childhood trauma or you've got a belief that you just keep believing because you've believed it for so long, you think it's true. Let me teach you how to break this cycle and rewire your neural pathways so that you can believe something else. So I do a lot of that work with them. I get them out of their own way so they can feel unstoppable and they can go out and do whatever it is that they want to do.
Right. And it's like, it's interesting though, that you would say even like these women that have like the 8-figure brands, like they're always like chasing something. You're like, but wait, like what, but why are you chasing it? Let's like bring it back in.
Exactly. And then, and so then I'll start with basics. I'm like, I had one client, she came to me, she was making about $100,000 a month. And then we worked with her for a month or it was about six weeks. She had a $400,000 a month, but she had a limit she believed that she couldn't make that much money because she didn't want to be, one of our major things is to feel like we belong to the tribe still, our families. So if we're successful as women, we feel like we might get disowned or rejected. So once we rewired that one belief with her, she made she had a baby the next day, or was it 2 days later after her launch?
That's crazy.
And, but we just don't know how we're keeping ourselves stuck or creating a ceiling because we're afraid of our bigness. Like so many women I work with are afraid to be fully seen, show up in their power and just be their most authentic self. Like, is it safe to really be me? And I just give them the tools that I use and I'm like, go do this and then it will help you show up. It's like, you're allowed to be who you are.
Yeah. It's crazy though. It's true for so many women. It's like you have this imposter syndrome, like you talk about, and it's like allowing yourself to break through that and really create whatever it is you want. It's funny too, because like for me, I'll find myself being like, oh, you should just be grateful with where you're at, And then I get this like, oh, but why do I feel like a bigger calling to do something? And it's like, where do I go with that? And I think it comes down to like, you can create whatever it is you want that's possible. And I really genuinely believe it's about like impacting and helping other people. So now like you do primarily coach women?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, it seems like you have like a really good niche on that, especially like entrepreneur women, like balancing the masculine and feminine, breaking through like limiting beliefs. When did you decide to write your book?
I knew I was going to write a book a long time ago, and I have another book that I'm writing right now too, cool. But I knew that this book had to go out there because I'd read so many books. I was like a voracious reader and I'd read certain things and it wasn't anything that was really speaking directly to me. And I'm like and when I would share posts I'd write really long posts on Facebook and they would get shared so many times, they get like 500-600 likes. I'm like, this stuff is resonating out here. I need to put this all together in a book. So I got some help and I wrote the book and the book's been killing it.
Tell us the name of your book.
Unlocking the Quantum Woman.
I know. I love that title. I was like, I want to be a quantum woman. Well, I don't know what that means.
The brand is the Quantum Woman. Like, who is she? She's a woman that gets to have it all. She's the wealthiest woman in the room. Right. She's her most authentic her. And it's like our highest level of self where you don't have to wear a mask. You just, and the Quantum Woman is like, she's going at quantum speed. She's not waiting for tomorrow. Right. She doesn't have ceilings on her. She gets to have that success now.
So what is the primary, what do you talk about in the whole book?
In the whole book, we start off with, your desires. Like, what do you really want? Can you believe it? If I ask like, one of these women out there, I'm like, what do you want? They're like, well, I want a beach house. I want this. I'm like, no, what do you want? And a lot of the times they don't really know what they want because they cognitively, what they think their goals are, because it's coming from their mind. But if I sat down and did some work with them and I said, what's sitting in your soul that you want? Then they'll say, well, what? I thought about being an actress or I thought about doing something else. I had one client, April. She said she was a lawyer. She was everything. But then when she came to work, she goes, I want to act. Guess what? Guess who's acting, who's in a movie or a show? And she actually got her SAG card. But she came to me and she's like, I really wanted to do this. And then she went ahead and did it. But like, if you actually sat down, what do you want? So desires, I also talk about, what's stopping you from this place? How are you going to open up to receive? Like, what needs to get fixed? We go into childhood wounds. I teach them how to mark their triggers, because if you're in a reactive state as opposed to a responsive state, you're not in your power, right? Right. And then in the book, there's actually journaling prompts, because journaling actually saved my life. It was one of probably the most honest, self-reflective things. Wow. I have a great method of how I do it. And being a lawyer, I was always challenging my own BS all the time. I was like, okay, why do you think that?
Would you journal, just like write out your feelings, or like?
Well, when I journal, I get to the root of it. So like, I ask you. And so these journaling prompts are like, why do you believe that? Where did it come from? And so I help women get to the root so they can just pull it out so they don't have to repeat that pattern over and over again.
Yeah. It's my husband, he's a coach, and he has a program called Stacking. It sounds very similar, but he has like an app for it and everything. It's like, ask you yourself a series of questions, and then you get to the end of it and you're like, oh, it's like you're your own kind of like therapist through some kind of journaling.
Exactly. I like giving you the tools, because for me, I want anybody to be reliant on me. I want to give you the power to go do what you need to do in life. So when women read the book and they have not done some of this work, or even if they have, they're like, this is the best book I've ever read. So when I wrote the book, I wanted it to be a book that when you read it, you'd be like, oh, I need to give this to my girlfriends. And guess what? That's what's happening. Like, a movement's being created with it. And I have this saying in my business, more is coming. Yeah. Because when I felt like things were running out, when things were changing, I had to believe they were printing money or like more opportunities were coming. I couldn't believe like this was all one and done. Right. And so this is what women are doing. They're sharing this around, and it's happening is another thing I have. I had to believe like no matter what, to have the faith. And so when women are reading this book, they're like, it's on its way. It's already done.
When did you write that book? When did it come out?
It came out a year ago. And it's been a bestseller. It's been on the bestseller list for the whole year of Women in Business.
Is it on audio?
I did do the audio. That was the hardest thing I've ever done.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, this audio. I brought a copy for you, but I know you're probably an audio listener.
Because I'm always driving or whatever.
But I my toxic trait is to get the book and the audio, so I can just do both. Yeah. But I know you'll love the audio.
So you always knew you wanted to write a book?
Yeah, I have probably 7 books in me that I want to write.
Wow.
I feel like that is such a great way of building your authority of whatever you're doing, but it's also taking that gift that you got channeled and sharing it with the world.
Putting it out there.
Yeah. So if I die tomorrow, I've left something that's going to change lives forever. You know?
Yeah, and people can go. I'm in the process of writing my first book.
Congratulations!
I didn't want to do it. Thank you. I was like, I don't want to do it. It was one of those things that I just felt like God keeps telling me, like, you need to do this, you need to do this, and I'm like, okay, fine. It
was a hard process.
Yeah,
but I have somebody helping me. I had someone help guiding me through the process. Yeah, because it was up to me. This book would have never been written. I needed someone to be on me.
Did you have a ghostwriter?
Yeah. Well, yeah. I had someone that was helping through the process. But it's me. It's all the things that I teach, and there's nothing really like it. And I wrote it so like anybody could read it. Like it wasn't above. Do
you share anything from just like your experience of like
everything?
Oh, you do? So is it like memoir / like teaching?
It's my experiences, clients' experiences. Okay. It's so relatable that women find themselves in the book too. They feel like I'm talking directly to them when they're reading it. Like, oh, she gets me. Yeah. And I feel like when you have somebody that understands you, your opportunity to have a consciousness shift is so much more expanded because you're like, oh, I see it this way. And women are on their 3rd, 4th, 5th and reading of it. They're listening to the audiobook and they're going back to it again. And so it's got a consciousness to the book too.
Well, it's interesting. I can tell you right now, like right when you came into my house and we started talking, you're very easy to relate to and connect to. I was like, oh, because I didn't know a ton about you. And immediately I was like, oh, I can resonate with all the things that you're saying. And so I love that you're on the show sharing it because so many women, they're like, oh, I'm like crazy. like they might be like, I'm a control freak or I'm this or I'm that. And it's like, you're sharing your story.
I'm reformed.
Yeah. But you're sharing your story. You're like, guys, there's another way. Like you can get out of this. And now you're training women to do it, which I think is
and become millionaires. Like I feel like we get to be unapologetically rich. Yeah. Have as much money as you want to, have it all. Money's just a tool. Go have the money, go take care of your kids, have a man provide for you too. Cause I still think men should provide.
Yeah, same.
And so, but we get to be rich too. Yeah. And why would you limit yourself? And like when women are like, well, I'd rather have the Louis Vuitton or I'd rather have the vacation. I'm like, well, why can't you have both? Yeah. Like I want them to be in the and both world. Like you get to have it all. Like don't limit.
I can't buy this bag. I'd rather travel. And I'm like, I want to buy the bag and travel.
Yeah. I'm taking the bag on the travel.
Exactly.
Like, I want all of it. And
I bought the bag for the travel.
But believe it or not, those women that are making millions, they have this limit.
I know. It's weird. Even if they have a ton of money, it is a chip. It's like a scarcity driven chip. Absolutely. That you're like, how do you?
Well, it's their abandonment wound and it's their mistrust. Like I always know when a woman has a problem spending money, she feels like when it goes out, it'll never come back. So I'm like, who left you? Yeah. I'm like, we have to dig into that a little bit. Or if they have inconsistent cash months, I'm like, oh, okay. So you don't trust the money's always going to be there. Or I look at something else that's going on or they're undercharging for their offers. Yeah. I'm like, oh, you have an unworthiness thing. Or if they don't have a team, I'm like, oh, you can't receive support. I can find out where that money
like asking the right questions.
Yeah, it's all of it is like it's telling a story when I look in their business. Men do it too.
Oh yeah, for sure. I love that. It's definitely like a gift. I've coached a ton of women, but they're all hairstylists. So I feel like I have like my one lane where I'm like, oh, I can see your problem before you see your problem. But
you figured it out though. I mean, obviously you've done some work because your husband's successful, but you know how to receive from him, and you are successful, and you also know show up in your power, and you still can be a mom. Like you have a balance. You can feel it in you that you've worked to get this balance. So it wasn't like it was given to you.
Yeah. Well, and that's what I was going to ask you is like, for me, it was such a journey. Like every little piece, it was like, why am I feeling guilty for this? Why am I putting limits on what I can make? Why am I putting limits on my marriage? And it was like each little area for me, people are like, how'd you do it? And I'm like, first there's this consciousness of like, wait, why am I living in this painful space? And then there's this thing of like, well, how do I get out of it and create what I want? But it, like, for me, it's still an ongoing process, right? But it took like years. And so I think a lot of times people think like, oh, I'm going to take one coaching program and I'm healed. And yes, that will help. But it's like, you have to heal yourself first. Like, how long was it in your journey, you know, from the yoga day crying to who you are now?
Right.
Like, it's a daily effort. Like you said, you were meditating an hour a day. You were studying, you were reading. It's like, it's not
and
something
then new
happens
things
overnight.
came up. Like I had to break my toxic cycle with men. You know, I'd made millions before that, but then I was like, okay, wait, I have to figure out why was I still attracting guys that were hot from the gym with abs and not figure out, you know, like, wait, we need a little more substance here, right? I need emotionally mastered men, but I had to figure that out. Like it was all layers. But if you don't have the thing that you want, you got to look inside of yourself and ask why. So maybe you don't feel like deserving of it, or you're just not equipped to ask the right questions to get it. So I always feel like if we know that we can be in that powerful place, we can have anything we want. I mean, I'd never be an NBA basketball player, but I don't have a desire for that.
Like, I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
How did you, with like, just your relationship with men now, like from your first relationship, we're feeling like you were the ice queen. And now feeling like, then you went through your ab phase, ab boy phase.
It was a long phase, lady. Long phase of hot boys in the
you
gym.
Deserve it.
I mean, it was like 6'2" with abs. Are you toxic? Oh, come on in.
You're like, it's fine.
I'm like, oh, you drive a nice car? Come on over here. Let's have a talk, you know? Yeah. But honestly, it was not too long ago. You know, I went through another year of celibacy and I now know that I'm so deserving of a great man, but I didn't know that before. When you grow up with that trauma and you grow up in that unworthiness, you settle. Even when a woman can make money, she'll still settle and she'll still not see that she's deserving of it. And I've broken those cycles now, knowing that I can have a man who's emotionally mastered. Like we need more men doing this work too. You know, we need more men realizing that it's not. So I did my job with my son, raising a son who was emotionally mastered, right? So I know now what to recognize. I still have like the triggers of it that I have to mark myself and be like, oh, he's cute. But I'm like, no, you know, this is a red flag right here. Like he is the red flag. Walk away from it. Like, you know, like,
walk away from the abs.
Walk away from it. Just everybody can do that.
Just for a minute. No,
I mean, or if you want to have fun, that's what you're getting, right? But I also know what I deserve now and what I bring to the table. Like I remember one time I was at dinner. We were at this really nice place in Dallas. A friend of mine was there and we're in the private room and he's like, why do you like this guy? I'm like, well, he reads, he goes to the gym and I was listening to a couple of things and he goes, Shamina. He goes, that's basic shit. He's like, this is the bare minimum a man should have. And then when he said that to me, it kind of hit me like a ton of bricks. I was like, you're right. But that's when I knew I had to go back in and fix it was me.
Yeah.
You know,
I think it's interesting too. Like I love just like connecting with people. And so it's women, I think we are very like checklisters, like even down to our man. We're like, well, if he does X, Y, and Z, like then I'll have the perfect man. And it's interesting. I mean, I've been married for 21 years.
Congratulations.
Thank you. It's been a feat, but there was times where we lost the connection. And then as I got older, I was like, hey, I don't just want the house and the cars. I want it all. But it comes with having that openness, right? And having that, you got to let your man in. You've got to have that feminine openness in order to attract that man that you
to receive his love.
Yeah, to get that man.
And a lot of women don't.
Yeah, they block it. And so then you end up kind of in that same cycle. But it just comes back to, like you said, like it's a daily conscious effort, you know, and you'll slip back into the old version of you and you're like, no. Like that's
so true.
You know, you're like, okay, because it was part of your life. But then you have to, my husband and I are always constantly reminding, we'll get in like a little fight or something. I'm like, that was a stupid fight. That was like 5 years ago us. Like, why are we even, you know, like, why are we even entertaining this argument right now? That was just a stupid human moment. And so I think it's important for people that are listening that this isn't an overnight journey.
No.
And it's something that, you know, like you said, you might have your wake up moment, but then from there, it's like, what are you going to do with it?
Yeah. So. We were checking into the hotel and I saw the woman doing all the checking in. I was like, oh, so she wears the pants in that. Because her husband and her son were behind. I'm like, I don't ever want to be the one checking in the hotel. I want my man to make the arrangements. And when I know a man is taking care of those things, I know like we're in the right roles.
Yeah.
Like I just don't think women realize that they're stepping on their men's toes and doing things because they're such control freaks. And so it was a journey for me to realize and recognize that behavior and be like, oh, I don't need to tell him what to do. I don't need to do this. Like he's a man.
Maybe good in work mode. But
well, if he asks my opinion, but if not, it's none of my business to get involved.
Yeah. And I don't know about you, but for me, because I went through, like I said, a very masculine phase and my husband and I were like competitors. And then finally, when I kind of opened it up, like I was like, why can't I let him get my door? Like, why am I like, oh, I can do it? Like that doesn't mean a submissiveness doesn't mean like you're weak. It's just like letting the man show up in like a different role. And like, truth is, I wanted that. I wanted my door open. I wanted to be pampered. I wanted all the things. Like, we just have this mindset of like, I can do it all. But then that's like almost a turn off to the guys.
Oh, of course it is. Well, I mean, like, I know when all these women come to me, I'm like, so I know the bedroom's dry. Like, I know there's a problem there.
Yeah.
Or the way you're having sex is a hit him and quit it kind of thing. Like, let me get these sheets washed. Like, we got a time, we got to go now. So when they say that, like, their faces go red, and I'm like, you've got to like be a receiver,
Right.
And so I think when they start, we've had 6 babies now made out of our group, because they start having so much sex when they start doing this work, and like the man,
and that's what they wanted.
That's what they wanted the whole time. Or like their men are now attracted to them, and again, and like they're realizing, wait, I was playing the wrong role before. Yeah. So it's so many things. It's not just money. It's like they start realizing, like, wait, I was doing way too much.
Yeah,
I'm like, give him something to do. Ask for help.
Right.
And instead of trying to control and do it all. And when you can start doing that, you're going to start seeing your money shift. You're going to start seeing how people are going to come out and support you. Like, say yes if someone wanted to grab your bag or hold the door open, or even a compliment. Like, I had to really work on that. When someone say you're pretty, I'm like, what? Oh no. And I'm like, yes, you're right.
You're like, thank you. Thank you. How hard to say thank you.
Because it's so hard to receive.
Yeah, I get it. And I think this is like hitting home with so many women. And so again, I love that you're like on the show and you're sharing it. And I feel like if anybody's like listening to this show, like understand it's like learning to receive and learning, giving yourself permission and all these little things. And what's crazy about it, and I don't know how you feel about it, but like once I started allowing all these things in my life, it was like I felt free.
Totally.
You're like, oh my God, I actually feel more like myself than before. And I'm happier and I feel more open and I just
you're lighter.
You're lighter. And so that's what I try to express to like a lot of the women that I coach is like, hey, you need to like let go a little bit,
Well, they're wind so tight because they're just like, everything is such a stressful situation. Now I'm like, well, we had so many snafus on the way here and I was like, it'll figure itself out. It's not worth me stressing about it.
Exactly.
Like I'll just figure it. And then I think if more women had that too, they would just be so much more enjoyable to be around.
Yeah.
But if they're stressing out all the time, that their stress is going to leak out to their partner, because men just want to fix things for us.
I know.
And so if you are not giving him the opportunity to fix something, you're sitting here stressing out about it, that he feels like useless. And that doesn't help the situation, So it's just like, let things go. I've just learned, it was such a huge thing for me to learn.
Same. I can like relate to, and like I said,
you got a nice man. I'm looking for mine still.
I know.
I'm waiting for him to walk through the door.
But even being married that long, like it's been a conscious work. You know what I mean? Like there's amazing moments you're just like,
well, you guys are amazing to work on it,
Yeah. We almost called it quit a few times, but now I feel like we're in a solid place. Like I'm like, you're my human. So if we get in a fight, like we're not going to get divorced. We're just know that we need to like bring it back together.
Yeah.
But so tell me, where can people, if they want to join, because I was looking on your Instagram and I was like, I know you did coaching and I couldn't figure out how would somebody join?
Well, we have a Millionaire Club that we have women join,
okay, cool.
Or we've got our Mastermind or Wealthy CEO. They can come and join. We've got a lot of little programs for people to just start getting in their feet wet to come work with us. I've got a Facebook group called the Quantum Woman Group.
Okay, I
mean,
saw
that's
that.
surprising.
Mm-hmm.
And
is that something they can just join?
Yeah, anybody can join it.
Okay,
yeah,
cool.
we have a lot of free trainings in there.
Cool.
I love giving back. And my YouTube channel, they can go check me out on Shamina Taylor. I talk about money a lot there. But a lot of the more emotional stuff is in the Facebook group. And check out my podcast, Unapologetically Rich. Every woman said, you're like my woman. Like I listen to you. You're my best friend. And because I give like little 10-minute or sometimes 15-minute things that they help them shift their perspective. And so that's a good place to start to get to know who I am, is to listen to it.
I love that. You guys,
and get my book.
And get it. Can they, you said it's on like Spotify or
on Unlocking the Quantum Woman is on Amazon. And then you can go get the audiobook on there too. And you can go listen to Unapologetically Rich on Apple or on Spotify. It's on there. We've got great reviews. So go take a look.
I'm definitely interested in reading it, because I'm in the process of writing my book, but just like talking with you, I feel very comfortable and you're very relatable. And I love that you're like sharing real feelings and stories that a lot of women go through and can relate. So I'm definitely going to check it out.
You know why? Because nothing has power over me anymore.
Yeah, I love it.
Like I was so embarrassed when, these things happened and there was so much shame tied to it. And now I've neutralized all of that. It's a part
it's part of you.
Part of my journey. It's where I was. I did the best that I could with who I was at the time. Yeah. No shame on her game. And now I just do better because I know better now.
You know what I think it is and I hate using the term like perfectionist.
I was one.
Right. But a lot of women, they are that way. So they're almost like, well, I don't want to share this because then I don't look so perfect. And I'm like, no. If you share that, now you're actually relatable. Exactly. And people can actually trust you because right now you just look like a Barbie doll. Yeah. So now you're like, yeah, you still look like a Barbie doll. That's great. There's nothing wrong with that. However, you're real. Yeah. And your stories is what makes you real. And
people can feel that from you. I was telling my team, I said, I can walk in any room. I don't care how much money they have, what their influence
I'm comfortable
is.
With me.
I'm like, I'm going to be the boss in that room no matter what because of who I am and how I feel about myself. Because you can't tell me who I am. I know who I am now. And that's when you get emotionally mastered, like your past can't affect you. Your story can't have control over you. I get to be the real me. I wore a mask for years. Like those years, what I was searching for on that mat, I have now. Yeah. And that to me is like, that's wealth.
And I love that too. Cause like you said, you're like, I can walk into any room and talk to anybody. And you're good with you. Yeah. And so I think that is a skill that you've mastered. And I love that you're now coaching other women. You have your book. What's your new book called?
It's going to be on money. Okay. And and we were toying with some of the titles, but it's probably going to be called Unapologetically Rich.
Oh, I like it.
Yeah. I like it. Just because it's something that I want everybody to feel like wealth is obtainable for them. It doesn't have to be something that you're searching for. I don't want people to feel like money has power over them. I want them to have power over money.
Yeah. I love that. And it's so much like a mindset too. So
everything about it is a mindset. Yeah. Believe it or not, you can show two people strategies how to make money, and if the one person has a expanded money consciousness, they will make more money than the other person who's struggling.
Right. Just based off their consciousness.
Yeah, I mean, I've done so many fun things. I went from having like literally no money in my bank account to taking my kids to Europe this summer. We flew first class there and back. Wow. We had a driver throughout Europe. We rented a yacht in the Amalfi Coast. Like Michael Jordan's yacht was beside us. I was like, single mama did this. You know what I mean? Like. And I have so many revenue streams and I still love my life. Like I wake up every day without an alarm clock, doing whatever I want to do. And I'm just grateful for life.
You don't have an alarm clock?
No, I don't do that shit.
I don't either. My husband makes fun of me
Let's go, girl.
Hard.
Let's go.
We
don't have to be part of that 5 o'clock.
No, we need to. Oh my gosh, thank you. He gets up at 3:30.
No, for what?
And I'm like, no, my body when it's ready to wake up, it wakes up.
Our nervous system needs healing. Yeah. So I don't need to rush up and go do that. I need to just wake up.
But I love that you're saying that because so many people brag on their Instagram. They're like 5:30. I'm like, I'm like 7 a.m. It's great.
Well, that's why we're going to be friends. Yeah, no, we don't need to wake up at that hour. I can still get it done. Yeah. So I just prioritize what's important.
Right. It's all about like your results in the end. That's what I always preach to my husband. I'm like, do I not get the results? And he's like, okay. I'm like, you're just jealous.
No, we just work smarter, not harder.
I love it. Where can they find you? Your social media?
Shamina Taylor.
Shamina Taylor.
Yeah, on Instagram, anywhere.
Instagram. Okay. Well, I feel like I'm a fan now. I kind of feel like I get to know people on their Instagram, but I love doing these podcasts because I immediately feel like I connect with people. So again, thank you for being here and sharing. You guys, if you are listening to this podcast, I already know you want to share it. So go ahead and share it with your friends, your family members, your girlfriends, anybody that you think it will help and impact. And thank you again so much for being on the show. I'm excited for your next book. You'll have to text me, tell me when it's out. I'm excited to read the next one. All right, guys, that's it for the podcast today. Hope you enjoyed another episode of the Danielle K. White Show. And we will see you every single week with new guests and amazing stories. All right, we'll see you next week.